Hello, Endersword here again, this time with a Bronze League game. This was posted on Reddit r StarCraft by Trolley here, or Trolley, or whatever you want to pronounce that as. And his opponent for today is going to be the Terran player Laceup. As I said, this is Bronze, and if anything, it is kind of on the lower end of Bronze, but I figured that there's a lot of people that have just picked up StarCraft kind of on sale or looking forward to it with Heart of the Swarm coming out, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to go back and revisit kind of some of the very basics of things. So the three key points to this are: number one, supply blocks suck. Everyone knows that. We've already got our Protoss player in a supply block situation. He's going to hit this, and he hasn't actually started the pylon. You definitely don't want to be supply blocking yourself this early. It's just kind of ridiculous. He's going to lose an entire probe and a half while this thing actually builds, and it's just going to put everything behind on that. This happens repeatedly during the game, and you really want to make sure that that's one of your top priorities, to make sure that you can always build things. Anytime that you're halted from building things, you're just at a complete disadvantage. The second thing, which I see in a lot of fairly low-level games, is that retreat is always an option. A lot of people just go attack with the force, and it's as if they never consider aborting that attack or seeing something that's not going to make it favorable and actually going back home instead. They just commit to the whole thing, and we'll see that happen a few times during this game. It's not something that you have to do. You can always take your forces and just leave with them. There's nothing that makes you commit to that. Third thing is that economy is generally the counter to defending or turtling. If you see a player that is very, very turtley and you don't know how to attack into that sort of thing, what you're going to be better off doing, instead of suiciding a bunch of forces in to something that you don't know how to deal with, or that may just be very difficult or inefficient to deal with, is go get a lot of economy. If you can just produce more, if you have more stuff, more resources, more ability to remax your army, you can eventually just starve them out, or eventually you're going to be able to afford inefficiently taking them out of that position, and that's kind of the way to get ahead with it. So moving on to what's going on here, we've got Zealots queued up, we've got another supply block. You generally don't want to be queuing up units. Ideally, you would never do it. You would never queue up units like this at all. Particularly attacking units this early in the game just doesn't really make sense. It's not like he's got something else to pay attention to or anything like that. Similarly, you don't want to queue up too many probes or whatever your worker is. One or two, I still do that myself, but you don't want to be getting into 3, 4, 5, anything like that. Maybe 2 if you're going to look away for a second and you just want to make sure that you've got them down. But you do want to wean yourself off that habit and be really efficient with it later on. Now, in terms of the general build order here, we're finally getting another pylon again after supply blocking at 26, but there's no cybernetics core going down. For Protoss, there's very few situations in which you would get a gateway and not immediately get a cybernetics core after it's done. So I know it's probably too early to overly worry about what build orders that you're going to use at the bronze level. You just want to get used to what's going on. There's certain things that are just kind of hard and fast rules, and cybernetics core right after gateway so that you can start warp gate research and that you can tech to other things is a pretty standard thing to do, so you do want to be doing that. Chrono boost is something that you have that works a lot to your advantage. It gets your economy going up, it gets units out quicker, gets tech done quicker. You don't want to be sitting at 100 and good that he is chrono boosting out the warp gates, but we'd like to see that on probes still being built here, like to see that on units getting out, like to see more gateways going down so that we can actually spend this money. Now, a poke up here with Zealots to see what's going on is good, and as he gets attacked, pull back, but don't come back. Go home. Go somewhere else. Go scout another area. There's no reason to have 2 Zealots attack up this ramp into something that there's no way that they were going to beat. So you end up losing about 200 resources to kill 1 Marine, and frankly, he didn't even have to let you kill 1 Marine. He could have just left the supply depot up there So we're going to check back in on this tab a few times during the game to see how efficient we're being in these actual attacks. So overall here, despite the fact that we're not building a lot of probes out of this, you want to continue to build probes out of this so that you have more when you go to expand. We are reasonably well saturated. You can get some benefit out of a few more probes here, but you want to build them up for when we expand into our natural or other location. Finally get some more gateways going down, but you can see the money's just kind of skyrocketed here. It's better to get those down quicker so that we can actually have a larger army out on the map. If you had a good timing, like say a pylon up here at this point and a bunch of these warp gates coming into play, and we had actually had maybe 5-6 more units actually out there and didn't sacrifice the zealots, all of a sudden it becomes possible to attack up this ramp into the only marine army here, or at least pick off a few of these add-ons on the barracks and so on. But we just don't have that possibility because this production wasn't actually there the whole time. And now that it is there, we're just not making full use out of it. Very slowly warping in things, just not using all the money available, and quickly getting into a situation where we are supply blocked again. When these warp gates become available to us, we're not going to be able to warp in there because there's no pylon going down, because there's nothing to stay ahead of your supply. So again, we can't use this. Our money's going to stockpile up and everything is just going to get behind, get this sentry out. One thing that I see in a lot of low levels from Protoss players as well is they really skimp on zealots. They kind of don't see them as being a very useful thing. I think maybe they find them hard to micro. They don't like the fact that it's not a ranged unit, but it's something you really want to get used to mixing in quite heavily in your army. If you look at professional players or just anyone in higher leagues, you're going to see a lot of zealots mixed in with the army at some points against Terran. It's certainly the primary part of the army in terms of the gateway units, but we just don't have any here. It's the zealots that really tank that damage, even though it feels sometimes like, well, they're not even in attack range. What am I going to do with these zealots? It's them that cover these other units in the back and tank that damage as you're coming in against the army, so you do want to get used to using that. Going for the hidden, semi-hidden base here, just going for the natural at his third. Another thing that's good to get in the habit of doing is just taking your natural. At low levels, you can get away with the fact that this will be undetected for a long period of time, but you're also not learning to just properly defend your own base with the army that you have and actually make a defended expansion pattern outwards. You're just kind of relying on the fact that he doesn't see it, and you're not really defending that. Now, moving up here, this attack should not be happening at all. There's a bunch of tanks here on the high ground. There's no real way to get this army reliably in here. The army is smaller than his opponents. These two things cannot directly engage. There's just the siege tanks here, whether they are sieged or not, are going to absolutely rip this apart. And while we get a fair bit of damage done here just due to the pretty much complete miscontrol of our Terran player, this is a full commitment and this army is going to be completely lost here, and there wasn't a lot of damage done to the other side. As we flip back to the resources lost tab, we can see that that was amazingly expensive. We've lost 4 times as much as the Terran player has during this. In that engagement, maybe a couple Marines were lost, a supply depot was lost, and a barracks was lost. That's not a good trade-off for an entire Protoss army that was lost there. It just doesn't make sense. There was also, even if that attack was a good idea, there was no forward pylon up, there was no way to reinforce that. These forces that were built in the meantime could have helped out in that sort of thing. If there was actually a pylon up, you could just warp in there. But again, another tendency that people tend to have in the lower leagues is I'm going to make an army, then I'm going to go attack with that and not reinforce it at all. and then I'm going to go home and make another different army. Then I'm going to attack with that and not reinforce it at all. You need to be kind of chaining those together and actually reinforcing your actions and moving things forward towards your opponent, not just attacking with what you've got, then rebuilding at home, because the defender is always going to be reinforcing as he's defending his base. You've got the defender's advantage. Protoss has the ability to warp in, so you've definitely got to be using that functionality if you want to stay ahead. Terran does come in and ultimately sees that this base is here, so now he knows this is now kind of a hard thing to defend, because we don't have a lot in the middle. We don't have a big enough force that we can split it up. There's not a lot of mobility in this type of thing to bounce back and forth. If the Terran player decided to do drops or decides to hit one location or the other, it's going to be actually hard to manage and defend that base. Now, where we are in this is the Terran's got a really good position. He's got a lot of siege tanks up. They're covering this ramp really well, but he hasn't expanded at all. We've got an observer in the base, so we kind of know what's going on here. We know that not only has he not expanded, but he's not even building another command center to do so. He's just kind of mining everything out here. As we look at some of the mineral patches, some of them are actually getting quite low. Others a little bit higher, the farther ones usually, but some of them are being mined out. We're going to eventually hit a point where this Terran is kind of starved out of his location and has to actually move into something else. But instead of letting that be the issue and letting him starve himself out, we're pressing it, just sending these forces into suicide into the Terran's base, and that's not what you want to be doing. There was really no chance that that was going to do anything successful. Basically killed the same supply depot from a little earlier, and didn't kill much of anything. If we look again at the resources lost tab, Terran has lost about 200 more resources in that attack, whereas thousands were lost by the Protoss player. No matter how good your economy is, you're not going to be able to make this difference. As the Terran comes in and drops this location, which, as I mentioned before, is almost completely indefensible. You could have been a little quicker pulling those probes out, but you're going to lose this base anyway. There's just nothing around that could possibly get all the way over here in time before he was able to do a massive amount of damage to this. Whereas if you just expand in your normal location, then even though he knows about it a lot sooner than the hidden base, it's just a better habit to be in. You're going to be able to actually defend this. 8 Marines is not enough to kill it if your base is here, but it's plenty to kill it if your base is over here. Of course, instead of going up and trying to defend that, we just get the march into the bunch of siege tanks again, and we've seen this result before. I don't know why he thought it was going to be any different this time. I guess it's one of those definitions of insanity things, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result out of it. Not even targeting any of these tanks, just kind of deciding I'm going to stand in the tank fire and instead go after the Marines here. So that's obviously not what we want to be doing. We can see that just the efficiency here is absolutely crazy. That while the Protoss player built way more stuff, and while he had a better economy, we could see that like the actual, well, a lot of them did die going to that natural base, but he did have 2 bases mining for some time. Even after losing all of that, we had probably 30-ish probes, I'd say 36 probes actually going and mining for us throughout the game, compared to only 21 SCVs just mining off one base. And we can see that he was about to bankrupt the really uneven actual mining here, that he must have sent things specifically to these minerals at some point. I bet that's where his rally point was actually based. But he's going to have to move at some point and try and take an expansion. He's going to actually have to move out. Whereas if we sat back at home, defended, got a big economy up, eventually Terran's not going to be able to do this turtley thing. He might be able to move to the natural, but he's not going to be able to guard the natural and his third and a fourth. So why don't we just take a third and a fourth and look to teching up. We know that these tanks are going to be an issue, so why not tech up to something maybe that can possibly counter that? Why don't we get some Colossus out so that we've got some vision over the high ground, so that we've got a little bit of range? We know that there's a lot of Marines out. They might be fairly squishy to some Colossus. We could always go again with a High Templar tech, go with Archons, go with DTs, see what he can actually get done with only one command center. While he wasn't dropping mules during this, if he's only got one command center, one orbital command, you would think that he would be low on scans. There's no engineering bay here at all. Yeah, I guess there isn't any engineering bay here at all, so he can't build turrets, anything like that. We could be dropping into locations. We could be making warp prisms to look for another way in. If someone's really well defended like this, that you've got 4 siege tanks just guarding a ramp and your only way in is that ramp, start to look for another way in. Look for another way that you can harass this player. And if you absolutely cannot do it, if he was like this and had missile turrets all over his base and a huge army all over his base, the response to that is to go out and get more economy in a way that you can defend yourself, and then just start mass producing to the point that he can't possibly keep up with it. So I hope that helps, and don't supply block yourself. Just econ your way out of any problems, and you'll rise fairly quickly. Thanks for watching.